Good afternoon. I'm going to introduce the introduction because that's important. My name is Yoshi Zweiback, and I lived here for 11 years, and now I live in Los Angeles. And part of the reason that I came up for the conference is that we want to try to bring this experience to the Los Angeles Jewish community, and I know that there's excitement about doing that in other places all over the country. So it's a real pleasure for me to be able to be part of this and to participate. Just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Naama, and she'll help you understand more about our wonderful panel. Please just make sure to silence your cell phones and be nice to each other. I don't know, make a new friend. And then after this session, the closing plenary will happen, and so we'll all go together back to the big tent for our closing session. All the bios and everything that you would possibly need to know is right here. So I don't want to take from our participants, but just want to say what a pleasure and an honor it has been for me to be part of the conversation today, and how much I look forward to hearing from all of you and enjoying this session, but also taking some of the ideas that we've been exposed to and that we've been able to think about, spend some time thinking about them more deeply and think about the implications going forward into the future. So thank you. So Naama, I'm going to turn everything over to you.
Thank you. I think I have it over here. Yeah, do you hear me? I'm a bit hoarse. It's like my third panel this week. And I've been speaking for 10 days already since I left Israel on many, many meetings. So I hope my voice will carry this. Shalom. We've had a long day. And I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm going to give a very short introductory in order for us to know who's here and what does it connect actually to what we're going to be talking about. And then we'll have a conversation among us, and we'll open up for a few questions. All this in an hour, and we'll make it happen. Okay. I also say that we had a fourth panelist here, Fainy Sukenik, an amazing young Haredi activist in Israel, but unfortunately her daughter isn't feeling well and she couldn't come, but we send a Achlama Mira to Shira. We'll start with Danny. If whoever doesn't know Danny, we're in San Francisco. Does anybody not know Danny? So, Danny Grossman is the Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco. He's a successful business owner and entrepreneur. Has served extensively on the Federation's Board of Directors, Endowment, and other committees, as well as on numerous Jewish and non-Jewish boards. Danny brings decades of experience as a leader in the Bay Area's Jewish and civic communities, and many years of business and public sector leadership. Previously, he was the CEO of Slow, Food for Fast Lives, and CEO and founder of Wild Plant Entertainment. He also served for 7 years in the U.S. Foreign Service as a diplomat overseas, and at the Department of State. He holds an MBA from Stanford University, which I was there first yesterday, beautiful, and received his BA in Russian and East European Studies from Yale University. Please welcome Danny. Roey Tshuva is the Deputy Secretary General at the Council of Youth Movements in Israel. Prior to his role at the Council, he was the Director of the Municipal Youth Division in Nes Tziona in Israel. Roey served many years at the Maccabi Youth Movement in Israel and led the movement as the Secretary General. He also served as a senior shaliach in representing the Maccabi World Union and the Jewish Agency in Baltimore's Jewish community. With over 20 years of experience in the informal education field, where he also holds an MBA in business management, specialized in public institutions management. Please welcome Roey. And JJ, I said JJ. Sorry. He wasn't JJ. You had to come.
I didn't realize it was getting so personal so quickly.
I have to get off script.
JJ is short for Joseph J. But my grandmother, who passed away, called me Joseph. So now there's nobody around to call me Joseph anymore, so you can be...
Vakasha. Yosef is here with us today.
Very relevant for the weekly portions in the Torah.
No, you speak already for so long, I never asked you. So JJ, Yosef, is the International Director at Gesher. In his role, he has led over 100 leaders from across the political and regional spectrum of Israel society on delegations over the past 3 years to experience, understand, and learn about American Jewry. JJ's unique position of growing up in New York and spending more than half his life in Israel positions him with key relationships in the Jewish communities in Israel and across the U.S., enabling him to seamlessly bridge the gap between the two centers of Jewish life. He has developed, crafted, and led immersive experiences to the Jewish communities of Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, previously Boston, now Washington, D.C. Prior to Gesher, JJ worked in Israel's high-tech sector at leading firms, including SanDisk, Jerusalem Global, and Israel Seed Partners. Having made Aliyah from New York 25 years ago, JJ now lives in Modi'in together with his wife and 6 children. Please welcome JJ.
I'll show you pictures later.
I want to clap his hand for his wife that's home with his 6 kids.
I'll clap also.
My great-grandfather as well.
And a few words about me. I am a senior executive and a social entrepreneur with experience in building and optimizing organizational strategy, change management, and leadership. I currently am in various roles working both in Israel and in the US, initiate and develop platforms that connect and engage Israelis with world Jewry. I'm also a member of the steering committee in Israel, forming this alliance of Israel leaders devoted to the 21st century Zionism with Re'ut. I returned to Israel last summer with my husband and 4 children. Not there yet, won't be there. After 5 years in Boston, where I established and led the IAC Boston chapter in 2014. It was the first chapter out of Los Angeles. Before, I worked 17 years in the largest HMO in Israel. And I serve as an activist and lay leader in several organizations in Israel. I'm a Harvard University graduate holding a master's degree in public administration, and a few others. We'll put that aside. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
So I know we discussed about this in the morning, and they talked about, because the discussion of this group, the way it's framed is, how do we structure Jewish leadership training programs for a Z3 world? I want to recap a few things about what does Z3 mean again in order for it to be part of what the discussion is. So we're talking about a framework with that Israel is the project of the Jewish people, okay? That the purpose of Zionism is to serve the continued significant existence of Jewish people and not just to build a strong Israel state. There are many more here, but I wanted the founding idea and logic of Zionism is Jewish peoplehood. And I think there are many more, and you can look all around the walls in the tent. But I want to address the issue that we're here today. So both here and in Israel, there are many institutions, many organizations that are working to create leadership in the Jewish world and to really understand what is our role. Israelis that come to the US or around the world to understand what is their role in Israel, and also vice versa. I was planning only to talk about the Israelis because that's most of our panelists, but because, Danny, I think you can speak of both. I don't think we're having enough conversation in this conference about the American piece. It's all about the Israeli piece, so feel free to speak about whatever you feel more comfortable. I really want to think with you in what is your, in your opinion, the 2 most important components that leaders need to be taught and trained for a Z3 world? B'vakasha, Danny.
Sure. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Let me just open by saying I think we're way behind in this conversation, let alone this execution, which is natural when you think about the fact of this discussion is about the fact that we can't talk about it. So if we're not talking about it, we're definitely not baking it into our leadership programs. So I'm going to say that right up front. One bucket of traits that I think we have to really support and train for: humility, curiosity, empathy. We don't think about that in leadership training usually. We think about what expertise can we provide them, what skills can we provide them. For this discussion, to get out of the blocks for this discussion right, curiosity, empathy, humility, because otherwise we won't have that conversation. And since you asked for 2, I'll name 2. One is the need for civil discourse. Not necessarily the skills to implement it. We have people like that, like Resetting the Table and others. And then the other is to making the case for a wide tent. When I'm glad that Ava's here, so I feel like she should be up here because she's the prototype of the leader we want. Ava Borgward is the president of J Street U nationally. She's here at Stanford. And when they approached us, the Federation, and said, we'd like to have a conversation, we have issues we'd like to raise with you, I had to do some prep work to make sure that could happen. I had to talk to some people about making the case for the tent and why they're in it and why we could have that conversation.
Thank you. JJ. Yosef.
First of all, thank you very much for I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank who's ever in the room for having me here. I think the two issues that I would point to would be first, the ability to listen. I think especially working with the Israeli side, Israelis have a tendency when they go through a course, and you touched on this a little bit also, or when we take them out of Israel to visit a Jewish community in the United States, they often feel as though they're on a Hasbara mission to explain Israel's policies. And one of the key components to our groups that we take is we have to spend a lot of time telling them we're not going to defend Israel. We're going to a bunch of meetings to listen to what the American Jewish community has to say about American Judaism or about Israel. But it's not our job to go there and tout, you have to defend us and Hasbara, Hasbara, Hasbara. The first and foremost issue is the ability for on the Israeli side, certainly to listen. I would say also on the American side. But as you mentioned, I'm working more with the Israeli leadership. The other issue, I think, which is nuanced, I think is very, very important and sometimes overlooked, is the need to, we speak about a wide tent, but on the Israeli side, I think the heterogeneity, maybe, is that a word? I've been in Israel for 25 years.
It is.
The heterogeneity of the groups that are participating in these conversations. We very quickly learned this in our groups, that if you bring a very like-minded group of Israelis to meet with, you brought up J Street, let's say J Street, and they're all liberal journalists in Israel, when you go back and have the group discussion to discuss what they heard, they're all going to basically have the same feeling. Whereas if you have a mix of right-wing, left-wing, male, female, religious, ultra-Orthodox even, which is sorely missing from this conversation here today, for example, if you look around, you get a much richer discussion and a much deeper understanding and an ability for you yourself as a participant in these leadership programs to develop your own opinion, because you hear people on the right of you or the left of you or in front of you or behind you, and you can become much more confident in your own opinions of the issues that you're being exposed to. So I think the ability to listen and the heterogeneity of the people participating in the conversation are two very, very key components of the Z3 movement going forward.
Thank you. Before I pass it on to Roey, I think I didn't say in the beginning in their bios that they wrote, and I was reading out, that the three panelists that are sitting here, is besides everything else they do, we're talking about, I think, the Gvanim group that the Federation works for years, also here, but also in Israel, really creating Israeli leaders and understanding what is their role in Israel, which is super important, and here in the Israeli-American community and Jewish community. That's one. Gesher, like I said, I think you have over 200 already.
266.
66. Yosef just said 266 participants, really from various groups in Israel that have come to various Jewish communities around the world. And Roey is sitting here because I think what your unique story about what's been happening in the past year with the youth movement, before you share your two components, give the people here a bit of an understanding what has been done in order for them to understand the relevance, if you don't mind.
So I think those who organized this conference and invited us to be part of it, because very important for us, us, the youth movements, the Israel youth movements, to be part of the discussion, because we feel that it is our role, in a way, to lead the future, because that we're dealing with the future. The youth, obviously. During the last year, we developed, maybe I'll go one step back. In Israel, we have 13 recognized youth movements. We're talking about a little bit over 350,000 participants, kids and youth from 4th grade to 12th grade, and some movements are even continue after the army service or during the army service. And we feel that we have a role here to educate them of what does it mean to be part of this Jewish people. It started many years ago. The first movement was established more than 100 years, the Shomer HaTzair. So being part of the Jewish-wide people is in our DNA. Obviously, when the Shomer HaTzair young people started the uprising at the Warsaw Ghetto, they did it because they understood they are responsible for the Jewish continuity and the Jewish people. So it is in our DNA, but the question, what does it mean now, started, let's say, a year or a little bit more, 2 years ago. I think few representatives of the movements went with Gesher actually on a mission to London. And the question was raised there and started a conversation which about a year ago started a project within the youth movements, the council. It is a cooperation between the Council of Youth Movement, the Jewish Agency, Avichai Institute, and the office, what do they call it?
The Ministry of the Diaspora Affairs.
The Ministry of the Diaspora, thank you. One of the things that happened is that now, these days, if I'm jumping to these days, every movement have one staff person in charge of peoplehood. That's the name of the Hebrew. That's the name of the project in the movement. Community, that's how we call it. But peoplehood in every movement. Now they can be. We support them with funds in order to do projects, programs in with two different legs. Let's say the first leg is develop educational programs to their teens, to their kids. I can say that I looked at the numbers this morning before I came just to make sure that I'm not wrong. Only in the last 6 months, about 15,000 kids and teens in Israel went through their own educational program regarding this topic, the peoplehood topic, okay? And about 10,000, and this is the other leg, met someone from the world Jewry. We don't say how you have to do it. We don't say what should be the content. We just say you have to develop an educational program and you have to meet other people. And in our council, we also have someone who is in charge of this project. She is doing it, that's her job, to moderate everything that happens at the movement.
So when I go back to the question about, with everything, you're doing an amazing job. Really are, and it's amazing to see the change that is happening and our futures, our kids. I mean, I agree. The question is, when you really bring in those leaders of the different movements, and even those people that are in each one of the youth movements or in the council, what do you think is the two components that are most important for you to teach them in order for them to pass it on to the kids?
So the first one, I think it is obvious, but it is not obvious for us in Israel, as an Israelis, is to learn about the Jewish streams or the other Jewish people around the world. I think it is obvious here when we're sitting among people who are interested in this topic, but it is not obvious at all in the Israeli educational system, because you don't learn it, not in school, until not so long, not in the youth movement. So you don't know that there are different Jews out there. So this is the first thing that we're trying to do, and that's why the meetings between them is so important. The second is to learn about the challenges of the different communities. Because when you see someone that looks like you, and sometimes even, when you share same interest, you like the same music, and I'm talking about teens, right? So you can think that you share the same challenges, the same problems, but it is wrong. We know it, but we must make sure that they know it, because then when they're going to meet each other and they're going to speak with each other, they can create this complex relationship, and not only the relationship that, okay, we both Jews, and we're both young. We're trying to take them to the next level, to the next step when they're young.
So they don't need a Z3 conference when they're older.
So when
It's
they
obvious.
will be at, first of all, I believe that they should be at the Z3 conference, and unfortunately they're not here. So I will try to represent them, although I'm not that old, but I'm not a teenager anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think what we heard here, that we need a lot of soft skills and a lot of values, like you said, humility, understanding, humbleness, who we are in order to listen. It's many factors in order to really get to know someone. First of all, you have to make yourself a bit smaller, which is always helpful. But the second part is really, and they touched upon it also on the main stage, is the educational piece. You need to get to educate people on both sides. Who are the other side of this mishpacha? Who are the people sitting that you haven't met yet, that we want to create together a Jewish peoplehood, but we have not had the opportunity enough to learn? Because even I lived 12 years altogether in Boston. Not San Francisco, Boston, I know it's a different place, but even going to Jewish day school, you learn about Israel, you not necessarily learn about Israelis, okay? Going to school in Israel, you learn about the Shoah, you learn about being part of the Jewish world. You do not learn about Jewish people. So what we're talking about here is, how do you really learn about the other part of your family? By getting really to know people, just like you said. We have to create this, and this is all relating to meaningful mifgashim. How do you create experiences? How do you create conversations? How do you create something that is facilitated in a way that people really are there to listen more than speak, in order for them to go back and then create something of the doing? So that brings me to our second question. Really, each one of the organizations here, and many, many others, I think today there are 18 different organizations that are working on trips of Israelis to Jewish communities around the world. There are about 1,000 Israeli leaders, from MKs, journalists, education spheres, many, that come from Israel to visit Jewish communities. Each one of you are leading many of them. What are the challenges that you are facing today? And where do you think that you are managing to move that needle? Danny?
Sure. So we run a number of leadership programs. I'm going to focus on two for now. One of them is the Diller Teen Program, which was founded here. Sam's nodding his head. He knew I was going there. And is now rolled globally. Yep. And the other one is the Gvanim Program, which you mentioned. And I'm going to be a little bit self-critical here, because you talked about challenges. So I think there's the active omission and there's the active commission. The active omission relates to Gvanim. So was it a year and a half ago that we had the trifecta of Israeli government activities that left, certainly us in this community, feeling like we didn't have a place in Israel, from the conversion bill to the Kotel issue to the adoption issue. Something very unexpected happened. These hundreds of Gvanim graduates from a leadership program that we put together of social sector leaders to weave the different streams of Israeli society together. And during the course of this leadership training program, we bring them here. But we bring them here not to meet and get to know us. We bring them here to show them a different swipe at Jewish pluralism. What does it look like in the United States? What is the first gay synagogue or synagogue with outreach to LGBTQ people look like? So what was unanticipated for us is that when the trifecta of those issues happened, they stood up in Israel. And they said, this is not right. We know these people. We've been in this community. And the reason I say it's an act of omission is because we never trained that. We never asked for that. We never talked about that. They just did it on their own. But we've changed our course now, and we are going to understand that we work together on this. The act of commission, I'm going to say, probably relates to Dillerteen, because I went to a few Dillerteens prior to coming to this. This is a teen program that helps leadership training for kids here, and in particular connects them to a group of Dillerteens in Israel. And to a person, the several of them that I spoke to said, magnificent program, but when it comes to this discussion, this Israel discussion, we feel like the topic of the conflict, the occupation was entirely avoided. We knew it was out there, we just weren't allowed to touch it, and it left us feeling like we were being left out. So I think those are two things that we're looking at to change.
Very interesting. Thank you. JJ?
I think there are obviously a number of challenges. I think one of the key challenges is when you take a group of Israelis to show them American Jewry, and obviously we have a course of which includes time spent in Israel and then a week spent in Jewish community outside of Israel. 1 week to expose Israeli leadership to American Jewry is obviously very, very challenging. And we try within that week to, and on some of those programs, full disclosure, we even worked with Naama and Michal to try to help build a plan of how to expose Israelis in the right way to what American Jewry is all about. And I think we've done a relatively good job, but it still continues to be a very significant challenge. I think the other challenge is, the challenge that we all face is raising the importance of Israelis' connection to diaspora Jewry, to the level of discourse in Israel today. Israelis, by and large, don't care about diaspora Jewry. It's a very harsh statement, but it's the truth. It reminds me of a joke when I made Aliyah that a friend of mine told me, and he said, okay, you're moving to Israel. What does Israel have? The question was, what does Israel have that is the best? Every country has the best something. England has the best tea, Brazil has the best beaches, Switzerland has the best watches. What does Israel have that it's the best? And jokingly, he said, Israel has the best chutz la'aretz out of any country in the world. Loosely translated, Israel has the best diaspora out of any country in the world. Obviously, the joke is that it doesn't have anything good, but being out of Israel is good. But I think in that joke, there's a very strong kernel of truth. No other country in the world boasts as strong a diaspora as Israel does. Literally no other country in the world can have a conference in Palo Alto and have 1,000 people come and buy tickets because you feel connected to Israel. The challenge is to take our leadership and the civil leadership in Israel and make them aware of that to the point where they can raise that to the level of importance in Israeli society. And you mentioned that your group of Gvanim graduates stood up and were counted. And we're seeing that with our graduates now also. Once they've been through this process, which becomes a transformative process for them, we have countless examples now, and probably you've read some of it in the press, of Attila Shumfalvi from Ynet writes scathing articles about Israel's, and he didn't do this before participating on this course, about Israel's lack of caring about, just in Pittsburgh, his title was, "We care about conservative Jews when they're dead. Let's start caring about them when they're alive also." I mean, that's the kind of, and that's in Ynet, the most read Israeli news site. And countless of other examples. I mean, Roey just mentioned when we took a group, and I didn't even know that you were connecting the fact that we took a group of heads of youth movements
Part of the building, you know.
on one of these courses. And because of that, now every single youth movement in Israel has somebody responsible for Jewish peoplehood. I mean, that's impact that will have an effect for generations to come. But that's a challenge. The challenge is to raise that level of discourse to the point where the broader community in Israel cares about this issue as much as everyone in this room does. So I would say that those are the two challenges. Making Israelis care about it, and obviously on the practical side, how do we expose Israelis to an objective picture, if there is such a thing, of American Jewry. Obviously, if you go to LA or if you go to Boston or New York, you're showing them, by definition, a different slice of American Jewry.
Totally. Thank you. Roey?
Yeah. So I would like to start with the challenges that we have with the groups we're bringing from America to Israel. If my colleagues spoke about the groups from Israel who are coming here, and what do they get? So the groups who are coming, I had the privilege to bring some groups as a shaliach from the United States, from Baltimore to Israel, and I saw all the programs that was built, all of them more or less the same for all the groups from Baltimore, from New York, from the West Coast. Some of them were creative, so they took their teenagers first to Warsaw, to Poland, and then to Israel. So they did the 1 week there and 1 week there, as they want to say, here we are building the narrative. There was Holocaust, and then there was the state of Israel, and that's why we have to keep it as a shelter, and it's good. It's very, very innovative. And I think that first of all, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to teach our teenagers or your teenagers here when we send them to Israel? I totally agree that we have to open all the issues. We have to speak about the problems or the challenges or the conflict that we have with our neighbors. We live in a very, very difficult, very, very tough neighborhood. How to say that if you don't understand that, you can't understand why Israel sometimes doesn't care about the diaspora. There are some things we have to take care of maybe first, or when you wake up. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that that's how people see us sometimes. So this is one thing to say about the groups who are coming to Israel. We have to think about the narrative we want to teach them. But in Israel, or in the leadership programs that we have, for example, for example, I think that we are building a very high level of programs. Not everyone can get into these programs. Part of the magic in Dealer is, and it is a magical program, but part of the magic is that it's very hard to be part of it. So if we want to expose more people to the things that we're doing with those kids, we have to open the doors and try to find out how we let more people become part of programs like Dealer or others. So this is another challenge I see. And this is mainly the three things I wanted to say. The first one is how to change the narrative of the groups who are coming from Israel. The second one, how do we make it for everyone? Let's do education for everyone, not only for those who can. And also deal with the complex challenges or real challenges.
Thank you. JJ mentioned Michal that's sitting over here. Michal that lived here for 10 years? 10 years in Palo Alto, lives now in New Jersey, and is a partner of mine in really creating a platform, I'll discuss it in a second, of how do we engage Israelis in Israel to world jury on many, many issues, and been working with some of the people here already. What we've learned in the past year in the challenges that you all raised, and I'll add to it a bit, is that there are a few issues that we understand that some deal with them better and some not yet. First of all, we have a very diverse society in Israel. Okay, how do we expose and speak the same and different to different societies in Israel about the Israel diaspora relationship, and what are they part of the Jewish people? It's not that the Haredis will be the first one out there, but it's amazing to see, and I'm very sorry that Fainy isn't here, because Fainy was on Gesher, right? Yeah. She was a Haredi participant in one of these tours, and came back to her community with many others, by the way, and said, okay, we want to change something in our society. The same as the Chardalim, the same as the Datim, and of course the same as the Chilonim. So the first part is how do we create a shared language of the peoplehood in Israel, and then how do we speak it a bit differently to be tuned to the right ears of each segment in the Israeli society. It's a challenge, it's an issue, but what I feel in this past work that we've been doing is that there are enough people that are already engaged and want to be more engaged in this work, And it's kind of inspiring. There are people to work with and are already doing amazing things. So that's one issue about the diversity of society. The second that has also been raised here is something that it can't be only for leaders. And we keep on going, leaders, yes, leaders need to be influential. The question is, are they influential, or is it only very personal? Do they go on these trips and come back feeling, wow, now we understand what American Jewish society is, or from London, or if they go maybe all the way to Australia, or wherever they go. Do they have any ripple effect on their communities, in their professional work? What is their role? How do they pass on the torch of what they learned? That's another issue. In creating also lots of grassroots projects. Because if it will only be for the people that can pay for Diller, and Diller is a very expensive program, and very high level, which is an amazing program. Many, many, many teens aren't privileged to get to know. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I promise, well, okay. Okay.
Diller's not an expensive program. The Diller family subsidizes it heavily, and if you can't afford, the price is never an issue. My two kids just went through it, so I just want to be specific about that. It's an exclusive program because it's limited to 20 kids per area.
It's limited to, it's very limited to a small group. Again, like what you said, how do you create that it gets to the masses as well? And the third thing that I think is a challenge that each one of these people that are speaking here and many others are creating great leaders in understanding what the Jewish world is. The question is, if we continue working in these silos, how do we create something that will connect everyone together? How do we see, where do we really want to go in Israeli society? And not only by saying, okay, this is where we want to get to. We have a lot of assets. Every one of these leaders that have went to, and we can connect also the shlichim that are coming back. We can connect to the Taglita soldiers and Excel that Ifad is sitting here as well, alumni, many, many people that already are engaged. What can we do with them in order to really create something that will be impactful? So that brings me to my next question. Let me just see how much time I have in order to see if I have to rush you.
30 minutes.
Oh, we have time. Okay. What should be the next steps? Okay, you each take your leaders, and you kind of said this is something that you were surprised of what they do, but how do you organize it? How do we really understand? You still hear me?
Jacked.
Okay. How do we really create some kind of a ripple effect for these leaders that have gone in order for them to engage the masses, in order to create some kind of civil discourse that today we totally understand that there isn't, but we have more people engaged? Who wants to start?
I'm going to take third mover advantage.
No.
Enough of that first mover advantage.
That's why I said it. Okay, I think you wanted to break on that. Okay.
Sure.
Ladies first. I think that's the holy grail. I think that I can speak from our experience. We've like I said, worked now with over 250 such leaders, and over the last 3 years, and we from the beginning have worked with them to try to implement. Let me step back. Our program works with leaders. And we define leaders as people who have influence over others. So by definition, they're people who we believe can then go back into their spheres of influence and create that ripple effect. I think the challenge has been, and maybe we were a little bit late to the game with some of our leaders here, is how do we keep that flame burning once they come back? There's no question, we're very good, all of us probably are very good at getting them excited during the course. And I think it's important also to say it's not just a trip. Mm-hmm. It's part of a much larger course where there is an imparting of knowledge, the education piece. Then there's the immersive experience, the experiential piece. And then I think the key is how do you take that education and experience and translate that into a behavioral change or action. And we, first of all, keep them connected to each other because the experience that they went through was part of a group. And they have to, I think the importance of staying connected to that group, both socially and some of my most active WhatsApp groups on my phone are these groups that travel together on these programs. And they wish each other happy birthdays and mazel tov on a birth on the one hand, and then we create meetups for them during the year to keep them connected to one another. And then they also spur one another on to create projects along this avenue of the Israel diaspora relationship. And I think that literally tomorrow, the most recent group you mentioned, we had a group that went to Boston and New York. It's the final time they're meeting as part of the formal course. And we're bringing somebody in who does a seminar on how to create a business plan, essentially, to take what they've gained and to implement it in practice. Now, our group is made up of mayors who control budgets in their own cities, who can do one thing, journalists who can write about the issue, but also people who are heads of education departments. We had a group, and this is the group that we worked on together with Naama and Michal, who represented they're heads of education in local municipalities, responsible for the education of 20% of the Israeli population. The heads of education in places like Haifa and Ashdod and Modi'in, and Haredi cities like Beitar Illit, and smaller cities like Sderot. And now we're working together with them. One of them, because of this, actually did a twinning program or some sort of program. I don't know the exact specifics, but I was reading it on the WhatsApp group with, I don't know why I'm looking at you, but with one of the Diller programs, because she felt it was so important to expose her students in Haifa to students who come from America, from Jews from America. And we now are hiring somebody full-time, a second person now full-time, to implement this entire plan to measure the impact that these people are having once they complete the formal part of our course. What we tell our people when they join our course, in the first meeting, we say, welcome to the course. This is now the beginning of a 5-year journey, even though the formal course is only 3 months. Because we really expect them, once they complete the course, to go out and implement in their own sphere of influence something which will have that ripple effect in their city or in their newspaper or in their school district, so that the transformation that they've undergone can then have that ripple effect for the people underneath them. So I think it's part of a plan that we're now implementing and something which we are investing in heavily as we go forward.
Do you want to say a few words of what you're starting to think about with the President's House? Because I think it's also important for people to know about that.
Yeah. Thank you. As you say,
I'm here for you, JJ.
Part of our Leadership Institute that we've started is a partnership that we've also had with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. By the way, if you take Israelis out, at the end of every meeting we have them give a gift to the speaker, and they say, on behalf of Gesher and the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, none of the Israelis can pronounce the word diaspora. It becomes a running joke. They say diasparagus, they say weird. So I think we have to come up with a new word. But world jury. I think it's a great word. Or the Jewish people. Yeah. So part of the program we had was we partnered with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs to run courses for leadership in Israeli society. Part of it's also been funded by the Steinhardt Foundation, by the way. And now we have a pool of out of the 266 graduates of our Leadership Institute, about 150 of them are part of this partnership that we have with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. And now joining that partnership is the president's residence. The president, as you know, made his famous speech about the 4 tribes in Israel. He's amended the speech and added a 5th tribe being world Jewry, and he's given that speech in a few places as well. And he's now acting upon that, and he's implementing, they're now housing our alumni events and our alumni, and they even hired somebody full-time, Svika Klein, who's the only reporter in all of Israel focused on diaspora affairs and any of the major newspapers. He's leading now the joint project between us, the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and the President's residence to be the home for the meeting of all of the alumni of these programs to talk about how they can take what they've gained and implement it in their own spheres of influence. So our inaugural event for this new partnership is taking place on a date in Israel which has little significance, on December 25th. But that's when it's going to happen. So if any of you happen to be in Israel on December 25th and you want to join us, please let me know.
Exciting. Thank you, Roey.
Before I got here, a colleague of mine said, "Oh, you're going to meet all your friends." I said, "Which friends?" She said, "You know, your friends from the Jewish Agency, from Jewish federations. You group of people who meet, 1 week at the ICC, and then this conference." And I think that our first role, all of us, is break these walls. I mean, we should find those people who are not here, who are not interested. How we bring them and not stay in the same circles of people, meet again and again, speak about the same topics. And I'm not, it's important, and I really appreciate it that at least we do it. But we need the other people. We need also to see how we bring the, you started to say it, Nama, the non-leaders. How do we bring the non-leaders to this circle, to this conversation? I believe that if we, maybe in our groups, in our programs, we would give our people a mission at the end of the program, or a task. Your task is to bring 2 more new people to this circle, to engage 2 new people to the topic. Maybe in our, I don't know, ending ceremony, whatever we do, farewell event, at the end of the program, you have to bring 2 more people. Or to the meetings that we are going to have with world jury. You have to bring a friend of you that never met someone else from another Jew from another country, I mean. So maybe then we will start to bring those out of the circle people back to bring them to us, okay, to join us, to engage them to the topic. So, yeah.
Create that ripple effect. Yes,
Yep.
Danny. Thank you.
Okay, so where I started talking, I think I was mostly focused on how we ignite the conversation here and how do we train leaders to be able to do that, Gvanim notwithstanding. I'm now going to really focus on the conversation between this community and Israel. And I'm not going to talk about birthright, although it's tempting, because I don't think of that as a leadership program. So I don't think it really fits here. Before I go to your specific question about what approaches, there are 2 principles that would guide me in thinking about this. One of them is something we do every day at the Federation as of a couple of years ago. It actually started in Israel. And that is a very deliberate approach to community building. Not the expectation that if you throw people on a bus together, they're going to build community and get to know one another. Not the expectation if you throw them at a conference or a day session like this that we're going to actually get to know each other. But an actually very deliberate, thoughtful approach, because I think if you go back to what I said at the very beginning about empathy and humility and curiosity, that's not going to happen absent that kind of a context. It's harder to happen here like this, where we walk in cold and we're kind of trying to manifest those emotions. So community building. The second one is, and this is ill-fitting, but I just think it's so important, that I think we have to somehow break the paradigm of the benefactor-beneficiary relationship, what Zach, I think, called the thank you, patriarchal thank you. Because that...
I said rich uncle, not patriarchal.
Rich uncle, same thing. Patriarchal, yeah.
Patriarchal's definition of rich uncle.
Yeah, because that really, I think that really makes us stutter step in the work that we try and do in establishing real relationship and real connection. So 2 things. I mentioned one of them, and then I'll just tell you a story for shits and giggles because it's related. The one I mentioned is Gvanim, so we're being much more deliberate in how we think about that. We don't think anymore about, we'll bring them here to expose them to who we are here, who we are institutionally here, but actually who we are personally here. So there's personal connections. And the one that I don't know, keeps coming up in this conversation, as far as I know and as far as anybody can tell me, we had the first ever delegation of Israeli MKs come to San Francisco. And I've asked a lot of people about it. It was a very diverse delegation from one end of the political spectrum to the other. And I know that we haven't had them here before much because we put them up at a hotel where when I met them for the first breakfast, the complaining was over the top. They were so pissed off that they were put, and they were right. And I apologized to them. I said, look, you're right. We haven't had an MK delegation here, and I don't think we treated you in the manner that we'd like to in the future, so come back. But the reason is I'm not mentioning it for that. I'm mentioning it because that morning I revealed to them, as I tell you, that my mother was not Jewish, and my mother never converted. And while I had a conversion through a conservative ceremony, in the eyes of at least 2 of the people in that group, I was not Jewish to them. I met them again at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, they were really ragged, and they said this, with having spent the whole day trying to figure out how somebody who in their mind was not Jewish could lead a Jewish institution. It was really, and it's that kind of, I think, insights into each other and how we think that's so.
Great story. I think that's exactly the challenge that we're facing with Israeli society. Without living here, without really having conversations with people that from their mishpacha but live in a different way, is something so important in order to create that relationship. You can hear it also, I don't know if it was a different panel that I sat on today or for the plenary, I'm sorry, all the conversations are mixed in my mind, but it's just like when you speak to an Israeli that's been living here, we call them Israeli Americans, when they come back, then they say, okay, we came here and all of a sudden we understand that we're Jewish, or how do we come back and continue that conversation also in Israel? And the question is, and bringing it back to what I asked you, is there a place for it in Israel? And the problem is today that there really isn't, I would say. I think what we're trying to create is really creating that platform, is to create a platform where that everyone that is doing, how do we connect between one another? How do we really understand that with your Gvanim group, there are also assets to the youth movements, for example. And like I said before, not Taglit as Taglit, but the Israeli soldiers that were on the buses went through an experience already. They can be facilitators for the ripple effect groups, and so can the Shlichim HaChozrim that already been, or Shinshinim that have been here for a while. But there's so many assets out there, but no one's really convening and connecting and trying to see really how do we bring the Israeli society to understand where we need to be, which is something that if we really want to move this Zionist 21st century and understand in Israel, I'm saying, I am not saying that this country doesn't have its own issues about today, about Jewish peoplehood, diversity, many issues. I've lived here long enough to know. But when focusing on the Israeli society, is where I live today, I think that we really are in a time that there's also an opportunity. There's an opportunity because today, more than ever, the Israeli government, okay, even though it's not the right place to talk about the Israeli government in this city, but the Israeli government is prepared to put lots of money out there and say, we want to connect Israelis to learn more about the Jewish diaspora. There are many philanthropists in Israel that are prepared to put down money, and we want to change the Israeli discourse and consciousness about what does it mean to be part of the Jewish people. And there's also an awareness and kind of a longing of many organizations that say we want to pull together. We want to understand how we really can bring in our assets, which is something that hasn't happened before. Even in the past year, less than a year, there have been 8 conferences in Israel, 8 different conferences in Israel talking about Jewish peoplehood. It's like, whoa, what's happening? That just means that there's some kind of a longing for it to really to be. So I want to open it up to a few questions. Do we have time? Do you have time? Okay.
10 דקות.
10 דקות. So if, any questions here? I just want, since like I said, it's like my third panel this week, if you can also have a question mark at the end would be very helpful, and try to keep it short. You can say, of course, who you are and what this matters to you, but please let the young lead. Bakasha.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Eva Borgward. I'm the president of the JSU National Student Board. And I do want to ask about Taglit, which we acknowledge is not specifically a leadership program, but affects those in many ways. Like as a Zionist leader on campus, I'm affected by the fact that 40,000 young Jews go on this program every year. And also folks who will become leaders in other sectors have Jewish and Israel experiences that are shaped by this program. So I'm curious for our panelists, like if you were to if you could make one change to Taglit and the way that it's run, what would that be? And if you would, why?
I'm going to take a few questions. We also have someone that actually works in Taglit in the audience. She might help and answer if she wants to. She doesn't have to. I won't expose who she is if she doesn't want to. But yeah.
So my question is, there's been a couple of mentions about the need for heterogeneity and how to really try and get people to engage. So I'm wondering how, as you're facilitating conversations about programs that are needed, you're really thinking about not just how to engage whoever wants to come into the programs, but how to really get to those people who are hard to engage and try and make sure they're represented in your programming.
Thank you. One more we'll answer, and then we'll take a few more.
For a long time, I've been part here, of the Jewish community and the ICC. which is a wonderful, wonderful organization. But what I see, I have a grandchild who goes to Hausner, you know, and
ICC, no, ICC is the Israeli Community Center in the JCC.
No, Israeli cultural.
Cultural.
Yeah, and it represents the
Israeli
Israeli community here, which is huge.
Huge.
Okay, it's about the same size as the Jewish American community here.
In Northern
Yeah, it's-
California.
Here in this area, the Palo Alto I'm talking
The Valley,
about.
okay.
Yeah, it's huge, okay? And then my grandson
They
goes
make
to the-
noise as if they're the same, but they're not.
Not really, yeah.
That's okay.
No, they're big. There's a
Okay.
lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, you can't, you know, they say there's close to 1 million Jews outside, I mean, Israelis outside. But anyway,
Okay.
the point is, then I have a grandson that goes to the Hausner, you know, day school, et cetera, different places. And I myself find this, the two communities here, okay, very nice, everybody is high, everybody's friendly, there's nothing, you know, any friction, so to speak, but we're like oil and water. We're not able, when you talk about binding, you know, Israel over there, we have representatives, a lot of wonderful representatives here, but they're sticking and they're building their own community, okay? And I find that a problem because if an American Jew actually has an opportunity and meets in Israel, that's the one-on-one. That's, you know, and again, everybody's nice, it's not that, but they're growing like two parallel communities, and I've heard this about a lot of, you know, communities across the country. And yet this community here, they're a lot alike, intellectual level, and in many ways.
So what's the question?
No, the question is, what ideas would you have, okay, for instance, for a community like this right here, to be able to bring the two groups together, to make us a people, to make us a family here?
Okay. We'll get to Ifat in a second because I also want to help you answer the question. But you can answer any one of the three or all. Then you want to start with one of them at least?
I'll just popcorn it. So it's providential that one of our board members, Tali Ronen, is sitting at the back, who is Israeli-born, lives in this community, and is one of many bridges that we have working on exactly your question. I think the difference is that, at least certainly in the case of a couple that I've spoken to, it's not anymore that they're on their way back. It's a foot back out the door. I'm here for a while or forever. That makes a difference. So I think we see that as a huge opportunity to make connections with Israel. That's one. Two, hard to engage. Yeah, that's kind of the holy grail. One shift we made this year in terms of the way we thought about, or actually last year, Yom Ha'atzmaut programming is to decentralize it and not do one program for everyone, but to decentralize and support multiple programs. So maybe that's potentially an approach. Taglit, so I'm going to have some humility, Eva, and say that I have not been on Birthright, although I want to lead a trip. And I'm not sure. I'm still thinking. I mean, I think there's also the issue of full exposure to the political issues. I've definitely heard that, but I still want to think about that a little more.
So to your question, I think we've been taking groups here for the last 3 or 4 years already now, and we on every single group we meet with the Israel American Council, which just had an incredibly successful conference last week, which Naama was at. And I think for us, from my perspective of seeing it once every few months, the growth of that organization has been meteoric, heterogeneity.
That's Israeli.
It's Israeli American Council, but I think part of their mission, and I shouldn't speak for them, is to create an organized Israeli Jewish community so that they can be on par with the rest of the organized Jewish community in America, which I think can then lead to very nice bridges between the two communities. But I don't want to speak for them. I'm not a member of that. To the heterogeneity question, I think that's a great question and a huge challenge. We started, Gesher as an organization has been around for about 40 or 50, almost 50 years in Israel, working to bridge the gaps between the secular and religious in Israel. About 7 years ago, we kind of stepped back and said, let's look at Israeli society today. This organization was started so long ago, we can't just keep on doing the same thing and expect the same result. We made two major changes to our work. One was to not only work with youth, we were an exclusively educational organization. We made a decision to become a social impact organization and thus started our Leadership Institute, which are all these programs that I've been talking about. The other major change was to focus on the fastest growing demographic in Israel, which is the ultra-Orthodox society in Israel. And there we very deliberately we worked very deliberately and very slowly. First, with those who already had a foot in general Israeli society. So they were already there. We're not working on pushing Haredim to enter general Israeli society. But those who are already there, let's help make that integration smoother. So in the beginning, we were having what most Haredim would call probably not real Haredim. But over the years, we've gotten deeper and deeper into the community. And today, we're working with the major mouthpieces of the Haredi community in Israel. Those who are leading the 7 to 9 p.m. radio broadcast where they all get their news from. So very slowly and carefully, we are penetrating that community. And in the forming of our groups, which are about 20 people in each cohort, we start by recruiting various people. And then when we get to halfway through, we say, okay, we have 9 women and 1 man, which is usually not the case, obviously. We have 9 men and 1 woman. Okay, let's stop recruiting men and let's get women. We have 9 right-wingers and 1 left-winger. Let's get more left-wingers into the group. It's very important for us to get that heterogeneity piece right in every single one of our groups. We don't always succeed. There are obviously ilutzim, things which prevent us from doing that.
That's an American speaking. Well, you want to
The
say
last
something?
question. Let me just touch on the birthright question. I think Birthright's done an incredible job. I don't think there's another project in the Jewish community which has been as successful as Birthright in the last 30 years. Name me one other project that's been so successful and as good. It has its challenges and it has its hair. And I'm sure anyone sitting here in the audience who might represent Birthright can talk about what they're doing in terms of the follow-up, which is, I think, the challenge with any one of these programs. But I think they're doing things to make it better. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to try to help those who have been through this transformative experience to do that follow-up, to do it well, and to work with those who have come back to continue them on the path of whatever they've gained from these programs. But I think overall, if we step back from a macro level, it's an incredible program that's changed the trajectory of the American Jewish community. I don't think there's any other program that has been as successful.
And Israeli community too.
Yeah. True. Ifat, you want to address a question or you want to answer?
Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
Someone just say. I'll ask you a very important question, and I would love to speak more after. But by the way, when did you do Birthright?
I haven't done it yet.
Oh, so, okay. You should probably, to answer your question, it will be easier if you do it, and then you can answer it maybe, in a constructive way, because there is always a place to change things and to make them better. As someone who is working in the same area, we all go to other conferences and other places, and I always feel that there are, you go to the GA, we come here, we're here, where are the Fainy people and where are the dealer? Where is, I run Excel, which is the business and leadership program for Birthright, so it's a lifelong fellowship that actually brings on every American and Israeli, and they are together in Israel for 10 weeks, and then they continue being fellows for life. What is your approach towards 2 things? A, bringing, even if it's not in an organic way, groups of young professionals, whether they are teenagers or not, to sit with us in rooms like this. It's always a conference for young professionals or a conference those who are talking about young professionals. And more than that, what is your approach towards bringing 1 or 2 young professionals to sit on the high-level boards of every organization, which brings a different element, even if they don't have the same experience and
Or
knowledge
capacity.
that we have.
Or capacity, which is many times is the
So I would love to hear what are your thoughts about that?
But I don't know if it's fair to.
Roey, you want to address something here before Daddy says again?
As a representative of the young people.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I have answers regarding.
You can answer whatever you heard so far. I didn't get to you
I will say
before.
a few things because I see that
Yeah.
time is running out. But first of all, I think that it is a very good idea. I know that in some cities in Israel, for example, the mayors, they decided to put in their council young people, teenagers that will be members at the city council. And if cities can do it, I believe that also our organizations can do it. So that's a great idea. I wanted to say about how we engage them. I think that the best way that I know is make it personal. We have to work hard to understand what makes it personal for each person, because not anymore that everyone feels the same, everyone thinks the same, everyone want or need the same things. We have to work hard and find what make it personal for you, for each one of us. For one, it will be the culture. For one, it will be history. For one, it will be the business opportunity or the other professional opportunity. But we have to make it personal. You have to feel it in order to be part of it. Otherwise, you'll go on a trip. It's like going to any other trip to Europe. Rome is beautiful.
Orlando.
Other places in Europe. Yeah, there are beautiful places on earth. Why go to Israel? No, I've been there. I've been there when I was 16, and then on Birthright, I've been there again. Why should I go again with my family or with my... I would just say that we have a couple of, when I was in the Shlichut, so we met two older couple. I mean, they are in my parents' age. They are older than us, but we have this connection, and they are the only ones who called us a few weeks ago to say that they're coming to my son's bar mitzvah to visit Israel, and they want to travel with us, and because it is personal. Yeah. They didn't come to Israel for many years. They are coming now because they have this personal connection, and vice versa.
That goes back to our mifgash, very meaningful mifgash. Danny, you want to say?
So very quickly, I absolutely agree with you about diversity of leadership. We have, on our federation board, we have 3 members under the age of 35, and we do not have a minimum gift for exactly that reason. If we're intended to be a diverse, representative communal body, then we have to, so we do that. The other one, yeah, it's a great point. It's tricky. You know, last year we deployed a lot of our resources that we gave to the Z3 conference in the direction of bringing that demographic here. And it was really hard. It was hard maybe in part because of the name. It was in part hard because of the time of day, Sunday morning, you know.
49ers game on?
49ers, if somebody's still watching them.
I thought it's Hanukkah.
So, yeah. So I agree with you, and it's tough. At the level of professionals, you know, I think we have 7 here. And it's open to the entire community. But again, the professionals tend to be a younger demographic, and it's reflective of the challenge we're facing overall.
I'm going to connect to 2 things that you said. Last week, we mentioned that there was the IAC conference in Miami with about 3,000 people. There were over 550 college students and 200 teens. And the vibe was amazing because they were there listening to the older people conversation, and they were leading the conversations on the main stage and saying what has this work been reflected on them and how are they today changing their communities. So it was inspirational also for the older people to hear that, which I think is very, very important. It's challenging, but again, it all starts with engagement. So if the Diller teens, over the years, you have already groups, and they are engaged and they want to be heard. And their voices, and they have definitely what to say, because they're opinionated, great kids that went through something very meaningful to them on this Jewish peoplehood issue, Israel, everything we're talking about. We should think how they should have a place here also on main stage, and that's when they'll come. I think they also want to be, they only want to be participants, they also want to be heard. And to answer something that you said, asked before about how do you reach large scale, I don't sit in the government in Israel, but I work very closely. No, not yet. Don't work in the. But I know. I mean, since we're working with them, it's just last week, the day before I left. Too long away from home, but the day before I left, there was a conference of 50 new units about Jewish peoplehood that were introduced to middle school teachers. That means that the government of Israel is investing a lot of money. And we're also worldwide educators working on those, okay? Not only Israelis talking about what is peoplehood, in order to start integrated into the educational formal institutions. 2, what Roey said, it's all about youth movements. 350,000 young kids is super important. We're now working how to bring in all the 4,000 mechinot, gap year kids, also understanding and bringing lots of mifgashim Army, which is huge, huge educational piece, how to bring that into different sectors in the Army. So that the point is that part of what we're trying and we're actually achieving and going to achieve even more is to get it to wide span and around the country in many, many ages for them to feel that they're part of one Jewish people. One closing remark from each one of you, if you wish, on anything that you want to share before you haven't. B'kasha, Roey.
I will just say that we have to remember. Me too, of course. And we have to remember that the world is changing, leadership is changing. No more leaders that lead everyone. It's like, each community has its own leaders, each generation has its own leaders, and we have to approach different leaders and not think that we have one leader that we have to work with.
Thank you.
You get second mover here, I get third mover.
You got through it.
B'kasha.
In the previous session with, help me out, who's our beloved South African friend?
Infant.
Avram, thank you, slipped my mind. So he talked about the mutuality of love and the word lehitahev, in contrast to falling in love, which can be very unilateral. And what gives me enormous hope is that I think we're starting to open up for that to happen.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to connect to your story is that when many years ago, I was on gap year with Young Judea. And I lived with a family in Moshav Yinon, near Kiryat Malachi. And I was back, and I've been in close touch with that family ever since, so to the point of bonding. And when I was with her last month after the GA, my sister said, I'm a middle school teacher, and we have to do a section on people. She said, Can you connect me with a class? Can you give me some statements? I thought, it's great. Now it's going to be, we're going to be reaching to each other, so it's great.
Super important. JJ.
I think that we're now about to light the 8th Hanukkah candle tonight. My family did that about 10 hours ago in Modi'in, and I think that the symbolism of the fact that they in Israel and we here in America continue to spread light in the darkest time of the year when the days are the shortest here in the Western Hemisphere, I think that is symbolic of the fact that we all here are participating in this conference, I think, and the opportunity really to be the light in the darkness, to spread this movement forward and to care one about the other and recognize that we all really are part of the same people around the world.
Thank you very much.
Very
Thank
nice.
you for being here.
Thank you.
Toda rabah.
Great to meet you.